Hi everyone, I'm Kaius with a K, and lately I've been seeing a lot of discussion around things like alternate costumes in fighting games, and more specifically I've been seeing talk about alternate colour palettes. Granted, since I'm in a lot of fighting game modding spaces, this topic actually comes up relatively often in my orbit. If you somehow don't know what an alternate colour is, or you just want to hear me then explain fighting game esoterica, an alternate colour, sometimes better known as a palette swap, is an alternate skin variation for a playable character in a fighting game. If you want to compare this to other genres, it'd be analogous to a skin from another kind of game. It's a pretty fun way to just express yourself through characters you like, and skins and colour palettes represent that. If you want to be technical, the first instance of a fighting game having colour swaps was Karate Champ, as it had one playable character who wore a white gi on one player and a red gi on the other. As an aside, I get the feeling that this colour choice informed Capcom's decision to make Ryu wear white and Ken wear red, but that's hella off topic. Speaking of Street Fighter though, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition was most likely the game that pioneered the approach of alternate colours, specifically as a way to allow mirror matches while preserving the readability of the characters and action. As such, the alternate colours introduced in Champion Edition aren't drastically different, but noticeably different enough to be distinct at a glance. Keep this part in mind because, believe me, certain developers will stop giving a shit about readability a few decades down the line from now. Champion Edition's cast uses their default colours regardless of which attack button you press on the character select screen, but you can access their alternate colour by pressing the start button. As stated previously, most of these colours are more or less just a standard colour shift for readability purposes. For example, Ryu goes from white and red to black and blue, E-Honda's blues and reds are swapped, and Chun-Li goes from blue to red. There are some minor changes to the character's skin tones as well, but with the exception of Blanka and Dhalsim, the skin colour is usually lost a little in the action, especially since the changes are so minute that you probably didn't even notice some of these until I mentioned them just now. As for Blanka and Dhalsim, these two have extremely different skin colours. I always understood Blanka due to his green skin, but Dhalsim's skin colour changing to such random hues always confused me, like his grey skin in Champion Edition. I can only assume this could be because Capcom were playing into his skeleton motif, especially since most of these colours are just shades of white and grey, but there are blue ones later down the line, so... Hyper Fighting would redo all of the alternate colours and make them the character's main colour instead. Interestingly, Blanka's colour in Hyper Fighting is just the same general idea as his Champion Edition colour, except the two primary colours are swapped around. His Hyper Fighting colour is definitely better in my opinion. I like the way the hair has a sort of glow to it. Super and Super Turbo would up the amount of colours from 2 to 8, with the punch buttons selecting from the character's original 3 colours, and kicks giving the characters 3 more original colours, with a 7th and 8th colour being bound to pressing start and holding an attack button respectively. Granted, Super Turbo replaced the default colour with a new 9th colour, and moved the original default character to the character's old version, which can be accessed with a code. These old versions all have one alternate colour, which is typically just a very slight difference, even more subtle than the alts from Champion Edition. The Super Duology has great colours, but I can't help but feel like by Super Turbo they were phoning it in a little. A lot of colours introduced in these games make the characters look straight up sunburned, and a solid chunk of the new jab colours from Super Turbo struggle to stand out compared to the other colours that were already added in Super. Zangief's jab colour and his old kick colour were both similar shades of orange, meaning the only two colours Zangief got in Super Turbo are almost identical. Though if you ask me, I prefer the latter due to its more sleek white streaks. I blabbed a lot about specifically Champion Edition, so that might have lured you into a false sense of belief that this video has structure or something. Going forward, I'm mostly just going to be talking about palette swaps I find interesting. To keep this video having some kind of cadence though, I will cover all of the Capcom stuff I want to talk about first and foremost before I bring up all the other things. I guess I'll start with Alpha 2, which technically has 6 colours, but only 4 are ordinarily accessible as the 5th and 6th colours are stuck behind Alpha 2's shitty auto mode, meaning you effectively have to play a worse version of your character if you want to use Nash's superior pink jacket. Vampire Savior does this exact same shit, and it's just as annoying in that game. Another particular oddity I figured I'd mention is that Alpha 2 Gold features many different EX versions of characters. Most of them play like their Super Turbo versions or have other notable tweaks to their gameplay, with the sole exception of Sakura, whose EX version plays exactly the same as her base version and solely exists to allow her to have access to 6 more colour palettes. The 5th and 6th colours are also no longer locked behind selecting auto guard, so we're finally allowed to enjoy our pink Nash with no strings attached. Alpha 3 goes back to having colours be locked behind their ism system, with each ism having 2 colours associated with it. Ordinarily I would be against this, but I like the intent for isms to be easily readable even while in gameplay, as each character usually has a single visual element in their design that's consistent for both of the colours for that ism, usually the colour of the gloves or some other accessory. X-ism is the most interesting to me because being based on Super Turbo, a lot of colours are references to the older designs of the characters, like Cammy's outfit becoming green or Ken having his iconic white gi colour from Super Turbo. Chun-Li even uses her secret Alpha 2 costume based on her Street Fighter 2 design, and Sodom's Sire replaced with katanas in reference to his boss fight in the original final fight. I think that's enough Street Fighter for now. I've covered most of the bases of things that interested me. X-Men Children of the Atom takes a ton of steps back by not allowing you to access alternate colours unless specifically in a mirror match. The boss characters can't actually mirror match in Kota even if you somehow play as them using cheats, so Juggernaut and Magneto's Player 2 colours are actually completely unused in the original arcade release and look super unfinished and shitty. The recently released Fighting Collection actually uses their Marvel Superheroes colours instead, which makes them stand out a lot as the colour variations in Kota are usually extremely minor, but now there's just this yellow and black Magneto. Speaking of Marvel Superheroes, have you ever had a moment of hyperfixation just like me and wondered why Shumagaraf's P1 and P2 colours are swapped around compared to the later MVC games? Well, it's speculated that this is due to a programming error, though if you ask me, I think the fuchsia look was way more accurate to the original incarnation of Shumagaraf. Shumagaraf wasn't a very prevalent or hot topic character in Marvel media by the time Capcom requested to specifically use him in MSH, so having an original take makes a lot more sense. By the way, to access the P2 colours in MSH, you hold up for characters on the top row, and down for characters on the bottom row for 4 seconds before selecting your character. With the hidden characters in arcade classics, just hold whichever direction you inputted to hover over that slot. Similarly, Marvel vs. Capcom featured Venom with a very bright blue colour as his default colour, with his Player 2 colour more closely resembling his more recognisable colour scheme. This blue Venom would go on to be featured in Marvel Rivals as an exclusive colour variation unlockable to people who played in the closed beta. I was very lucky to get this, as I'm very much a blue Venom truther, but I wish they'd just let anyone get this in the full game, especially since securing beta keys was kind of a fucking disaster. MVC2's colours are a pretty mixed bag. You can kinda tell that Capcom was put under some level of Marvel mandate for what their characters could be represented wearing, because certain Marvel characters have very little variation in their colour schemes, usually just being hue or saturation shifted. Thanos is a particularly bad case of this since his colours just change to become more purple and more red, and Colossus is even worse in this regard. Just swapping Thanos' blues for greener blues or even grayscaling them would have done his colour diversity a lot of favours in my opinion. Magneto's yellow and black combo is missing from this game too, and one of the colours replacing it is just a slightly redder Magneto with darker purples. It's a real shame because I think MVC2 having 6 colours is a great idea, but a lot of them just aren't utilised very well. Okay, we're about the halfway point of my outline, so it's time for the mandated blabbing session. Explaining alternate colour palettes on their own is fine, but you're probably here to hear me divulge the more esoteric aspects of alternate colours, such as extra characters. I'm not talking about cases like Roger and Alex or Yun and Yang, though those cases are interesting and definitely worth exploring someday. Those are complete model changes, or head change in Yang's case, I suppose. I'm talking more about additional entire characters with their own gameplay derived entirely from other characters' sprites. The most obvious example of this is Reptile in Mortal Kombat 1. the actual Mortal Kombat one, not the game named Mortal Kombat. Has it been talked about how fucking stupid this is yet? Reptile's appearance in OGMK is an extremely basic colour swap of the sprites used to make Scorpion and Sub-Zero. He's essentially a composite of them in his gameplay and aesthetics. I mean, he's even green, the colour between yellow and blue, indicating that he was indeed a hard mix of the two. Reptile wasn't playable in this game, and his secret boss fight was added in a random arcade revision a little later in OGMK's lifespan. Because of this, he ended up cemented in arcade game mythology and legend, and as a result, Midway saw an extremely lucrative way of farming quarters from people who want to know all there is to know about their game. Which is why they did it again. And again. And again. They even made a palette swap in MK Special Forces. That game didn't even suffer from the limitation of sprite storage. They just did this because they could. Particularly interesting info to me is that despite the original MK3 not having any ninjas in its playable roster, they still managed to sneak in another one of these, since it features a version of Noob Saibot whose sprites are derived from Kano of all people. Well, I guess it makes sense. His big ass bald ass head probably makes him fit pretty well into the general silhouette of an MK ninja, so in that regard it's pretty clever and cool. It's not really as cool as my Shao Kahn recolor super boss that I made in Mugen 15 years ago where he just had red skin and was called Oni Shao Kahn. I thought that one was a real winner, but you know what, you're right, let's not pit two bad bitches against each other. BlazBlue has Lambda, who existed to replace Nu, but then Nu came back. It's never really a clear-cut story for these things. Unless your name is Fukua, then you're just a recolor that was primarily added as an April Fool's joke. Fukua and Lambda both ended up distinguishing themselves from their predecessors in later updates, but I just find it funny that they exist to begin with. Not too much on Lambda though, this is one of my favourite BlazBlue characters. Okay, now let's talk about the really important and pressing part of this video essay. Reference colours. There are a lot of instances where people working on the colour palettes of a fighting game can leverage the colour limitations to create palettes that pay homage to their favourite other pieces of media or even themselves at times. For example, this orange Dan Hibiki colour is a pretty commonly reoccurring Dan colour in the Street Fighter series, and it may seem like a generic recolour at first, but it's also pretty likely that this is a reference to the figure resembling Dan, later implied to be his father, Go Hibiki, in this iconic illustration of Sagat. Capcom vs SNK2 has a lot of colours just like this, like Ryu's Sean colour or Vice's Mature colour, though the hair colour is unchanged due to her skin and hair having matching palettes. Nakaruru has this purple colour, which is retroactively referenced, I guess, because they added a new version of her creatively named Purple Nakaruru in Samsho 6. This has no bearing on my actual point, I just wanted to bring up Purple Nakaruru. Ryu Haku has a colour based on his daughter, who sports blue instead of the standard Todo black hues. There's also this Benimaru colour which resembles Remy from Street Fighter 3. I'm not sure if this was an intentional reference, but I want to believe. Not just for me, but because it's the only time a Remy fan will ever get fucking anything outside of his debut game. But I know this isn't what you're here for. You want the completely insane shit, the Skullgirls shit, the BlazBlue shit. I hear ya. So let's dive into the deep end and talk about some of the completely fucking insane references people manage to cram onto other sprites. A personal favourite of mine for this stuff is BB Tag, with the exception of the Persona cast, which gets, frankly, really fucking ugly looking Persona 5 colours. Colour 13 is reserved for some of the most unhinged colour palettes possible. For example, here we have Ragna as Elsa, and of course, Jin as Anna. Noelle too gets a frozen colour, being also Anna, but like the version of Anna from the first movie when she was like literally fucking dying. It's pretty clear to me that someone on the BB Tag team was trying to appeal to the Western audience with their references, because there are colours based on Disney movies, Overwatch, and Steven Universe of all things. There's also this awesome Gambit Gordo, but I think everybody and their mother has seen that one by now. Carmine also has this colour which is possibly a deep cut reference to Radicles from OKKO, but the community has always been resistant to this hypothesis, and while there are some inconsistencies of the colour compared to Radicles' design, like the skin colour and the pants colour, it feels like the closest bet. Even the hand colour matches up with the colour of Radicles' pillars, which leaves way too many coincidences to hand wave away in my opinion. The BlazBlue wiki points this colour out as possibly being based on Morgan and her US cartoon design, but that makes absolutely no sense to me because her animated series design has literally no colour overlap with her cartoon design besides like maybe the legs, which were already the strongest point of contention anyway. Other Arxis games also have some standout favourites of mine, like this Rachel Alucard colour for Cagliostro in Granblue Versus, or this Index colour for Bridget in Plus R. Skullgirls and Them's Fighting Herds boast an absolutely astronomical amount of colours per character, and as you had probably anticipated, a lot of these are homages to anything and everything under the sun, really. On one hand, I feel like the overuse of reference colours makes the novelty of them kind of fade away, but on the other, the colours are really well put together and clearly the developers had a lot of fun making them, so I can't really hate all that much. Plus, it's genuinely impressive to see how well conveyed some of these references are, especially in Them's Fighting Herds' case where all the characters are quadrupedal, which you'd think would make these Easter eggs harder to pull off. There are definitely like far too many from these to name from these two games alone, so I've probably just put a personal favourite of mine or two on screen while I've talked about them. While it's not a 2D fighting game that follows standard colour palettes for the most part, Soul Calibur 6 introduced a second colour for 2B where she has darker skin and hair, and white clothes instead of black clothes. And this recolour would be so popular that it would become its own character, named 2P after the fact that it was her 2P colour. This colour would return in other near crossover media, and while I'm glazing this costume, I also want to use it to segue into our next mini segment. Not all colours are created equal, and honestly I haven't done enough hating in this video, so now I want to talk about my least favourite colour palettes in fighting games. Starting with 2B's like entire line of colours in Granblue Fantasy Versus. It's not like I necessarily mind having just 2B and 2P with colour variations, but the variations themselves are so absurdly minute that it's really easy to fall into a situation where you can't tell the difference. It's not like I think having subtle colours is bad, but there's like a line, you know? Some of her colours just look like you applied the Windows blue light tint to her first two colours, and part of me wonders if there's genuine issues of readability in all this. Probably not, but when you get to the point of thinking about that, you know, it gets kinda dicey. We should have a 2B colour where she has a chartreuse dress, bright pink hair, and tan skin, and I am so fucking serious, make the blindfold like orange, I don't give a fuck. I know that there are modders for this game, put that shit in and I will literally spend an entire month of my life exclusively playing 2B on stream in this skin. Anyway, let's talk about Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear's colours are usually pretty good, if not safe, but they have a little tendency to add some of the absolute worst colours you've ever seen in your entire life. The Eclipse colours were so bad that they're literally tournament banned. But what about the bad colours that aren't banned? What of poor old reverse shaded Zato? No, seriously, never ever do this in your colours, it never looks good. What the fuck was Arxis thinking with this one? Zappa has two colours in Plus R that are straight up exactly the same. EX Dust and Reload Kick are identical, and luckily Slash Kick is there if you get that colour taken from you because it's just the exact same colour of darker skin. He also has this exact same problem with a green colour. Luckily, as alluded to, these matching colours do default player 2 to the default character colour, but it's still weird to me that because of this some characters just have literally less colour options than other characters in the cast, and even then a lot of colours in these rotating colour sets are sometimes not even different enough to justify another slot. For example, Axel's EX Punch and Reload Heavy Slash are the same colour, so both players can't pick them, but Slash Heavy is fair game with the same colour of slightly less saturated skin, black shoes instead of brown shoes, and red chains instead of black ones. On paper this sounds fine, but in motion, it's extremely difficult to tell which Axel is which. In a humorously ironic twist of fate, this Axel colour would become the basis for his mirror match exclusive colour in the Xrd games. I kinda thought we were done with alt colours exclusive to mirror matches, but while I'm talking about plus R, I may as well talk about the gold and shadow colours. The TLDR is that characters wearing these colours get some form of being completely and utterly overpowered. Gold characters are all powered up and shadow versions have unlimited tension gauge. These are obviously banned from tournament play, and as much as I'd like to go into the minutiae of these, I'd rather save them for their own video. All you need to know for now is that I think these colours are kinda really ugly. I also have personal beef with certain BlazBlue colours, namely these ones with the green skin and these ones with the blue skin. The latter I have less of a problem with, even if I think it's kind of a terrible universal colour option, but the green and brown one is just straight up awful. No, seriously, what is with this zombies are attacking McDonald's ass colour scheme? It's just unappealing in every metric that matters, and that says a lot because BlazBlue colours can be extremely hit or miss. I try not to talk about Smash in these videos, mostly because Smash is like a fucking cognito hazard, but I feel like Pac-Man's are worth mentioning. I like subtle changes if they're still pretty impactful despite their subtlety. I've inferred as such before, and honestly, I don't really mind that Pac-Man's colours mostly feature armbands and the wing shoes, but the yellow colour is pretty bad. Yellow on yellow makes it a lot harder to tell an immediate difference, which just results in a slightly bulkier looking Pac-Man. It technically looks better in Smash Ultimate because the new art style in Ultimate makes Pac-Man look like a sickly pale Victorian street urchin, while the yellow is still as saturated as it was in Smash 4. And I know that while I'm talking about Smash 4, there's some expectation that I'm supposed to hate on Sonic's alt colours. But guess what? I think they're good. The feet and hands are the areas you'll be looking at most in close quarters, and these are the parts with the most noticeable changes. And the fur colour, while consistently a blue hue, I feel is different enough that it's legible in motion. As nice as it would be in theory to have a million Technicolor Sonics in each different colour of the rainbow, I actually kind of appreciate the subtlety here. It's like what MVC2 had me complaining about earlier, except like decently handled. So where do we go from here? Are we just stuck hoping that every character gets a bunch of banger colours in every fighting game only to end up disappointed when we get slight tints, shitty reverse shading and tournament banned colour palettes? Is it really all in the hands of the developers? Well, of course not! What a stupid question. You are literally a stupid doodle-brain numbnuts, and you should feel bad for asking that question. Not really, that was really out of pocket, I'm sorry. Anyway, Capcom vs SNK2 actually pioneered the direct answer to this: color edit mode. CVS2's console releases included a really basic, but still very flexible color editing feature that allowed you to create one custom color for each playable character. Essentially, you just get a grid of the character's color palette, and you can edit it color by color. A lot of Capcom and SNK games in the PS2 era had features just like this. I especially liked using this in the King of Fighters 11 when I was younger, mostly because it was really flexible and allowed you to recolor particle effects as well as copy and paste colors between different characters. You might not know this, or maybe you do. I don't know how many Street Fighter Alpha Anthology enjoyers there are in the audience, but Street Fighter Alpha Anthology actually has a hidden color edit mode, which can be accessed by holding R1 on the controller while entering the game's display settings menu. This works for all 5 games in the collection, and probably since it's a hidden option, it's a very rudimentary color editor. It only lets you edit one colour at a time from the looks of things, and there's no in-depth features like copy pasting or even previewing the colour against different backgrounds. These aren't assigned to a unique slot either, they straight up replace whatever colour you're choosing to edit. Unfortunately, over time, fighting game colour editors would start to dwindle in functionality. The King of Fighters 13 put players in a position where they could only choose from a preset palette of colours which are then applied to each individual part of the character's costume. Though this can be used to make pretty dynamic changes to character costumes like changing Raiden's tights into trunks or making K-Dash's costume asymmetrical, you regrettably aren't given a lot to work with here. You have 10 colours to start with, each taken from the character's 10 base colours, and then you can unlock 4 more rows, one for each time you've played the character 10 times. The unlockable rows are not unique and are universal across the cast, so it's pretty hard to find a 40 match grind per character particularly appealing. But that's not to say people haven't found interesting costumes to make, it's just a pretty huge step down in terms of functionality. And like, let's be real, no one is fucking like doing that. No one's doing that. There's not even a Steam save file that has this. Literally nobody's doing this. French Bread's fighting games have even less customizability, with only a couple of parts per character to edit, but it is saved by the fact that Uni 2 characters have like 40 colours by default. So it still feels like there's a lot of combinations, and to their credit, the base game colour palettes do tend to mix pretty well together if you know what you're doing. Ultra Street Fighter 2 was undeniably the worst, with characters having 3 or 4 editable parts, and while you're given the whole colour wheel, it doesn't really make the colour system feel any less restrictive. Unless you're giving your character Technicolor red skin, like a fucking Taki, you're not really going to stumble upon a colour idea that isn't already represented pretty well in Street Fighter 2's original colour repertoire. So, USF2 has been a shit show. First of all, I asked for footage and nobody could provide it for whatever reason. It's no big deal. I never specified the footage, but I needed like 5 minutes of someone fucking around in the colour editor, just like doing shit like this. That was it. I don't like using other YouTubers' stuff without their consent, and I'm strapped for time here, so I figured someone could come in clutch. I was wrong! Unfortunately, no one bought this game because it released on the same weekend as Breath of the fucking Wild. Why can't I do it myself? My capture card is bricked. Or so I thought, we'll get to that. I decided to go the emulation route. The ROMs for the game don't work on Ryujinx. Ryujinx is an immense hassle to install after Nintendo pulled them over for a dick measuring contest. Why? Because they hate game preservation. Anyway, the only site that had the file type I need to run this is archive.org. Guess what? Archive.org got DDoSed, so I'm shit out of luck. What's my last retort? Attempting to get the capture card to work. I don't own USF2 though, so I buy the game. It's 50% off anyway. I install it, I sell on OBS with my capture card expecting the worst, and what does it do? Absolutely fucking nothing. It's fine, it works fine. I wasted 28 hours of my life troubleshooting and asking around for something I didn't think I could do for myself, and decided that I would rather risk wasting money just to attempt to record 5 minutes of a colour editor I don't even like. Don't say I don't do anything for you guys, and thanks to my patrons for helping me afford this purchase in the first place. Fuck! I can only imagine that the reason colours were made so restrictive in the first place was because of the rise of online play, since I doubt fighting game developers wanted to be hounded by fans upset that they were fighting a character coloured specifically to blend into the environment, or some horny costume mod that made the character appear completely naked. Either way, it's a sad downfall to see. Luckily for us though, we live in a world where games get continuous supports from fans who not only play the game, but make sure that it isn't left out to dry in terms of things to see or do. I'm of course talking about mods, and colour palettes are no exception. Effectively, since the dawn of game modding, people have been swapping out palettes, and they've been using this issue to fix, well, just about every single problem I mentioned in this entire video. Reverse shaded Zato? More like reverse shaded Zato. Thanos having very little diversity in his colour palettes? I'm thinking I can make Thanos wear whatever colour I want. One of the most popular ways of modding palettes is through the use of dedicated tools like PalMod and Fighter Factory. PalMod is a pretty lightweight tool that makes paletting feel very haptic and makes the process a lot easier for someone new to the idea of palette modding. When it comes to colouring, it can be as easy as shifting some hues or highlighting a bunch of colours to make a gradient out of. I've noticed in my long days of palette modding that a lot of newcomers don't really like doing the in-between colours. So the option of automating that process in one click is something I can see being very appealing for that kind of person. Additionally, since PalMod uses game directories and ROMs to access the palette data, you can patch your colours into the game extremely easily. PalMod has native support for an extremely wide array of games, including almost every single game I've mentioned in this video so far, as well as multiple versions supported, so you can run PalModded stuff on not only Steam, but PlayStation, Dreamcast, Nintendo DS, and basically any console released before that. And also a wide array of arcade boards, which makes it pretty easy to get started with even if you don't necessarily own any 2D fighting games on Steam. Even Poly Game Master titles are supported by this software, which is especially crazy because I didn't think most people even knew what this was before Gail Wincoat talked about it in one of his videos. Fighter Factory on the other hand is a little more in depth and offers a few more tools than Palmod, but since it was originally designed for use with the Mugen engine, it might seem a bit cumbersome to get started on a colour palette that isn't from a Mugen character. Additionally, the interface might not seem as user-friendly to people who want to make mods in short bursts, since click and drag selecting isn't a thing, and the gradient feature is hidden behind an unmarked button. However, one of the stronger features of Fighter Factory in my opinion is the ability to add a second palette or image to the side of your working piece. This technique makes it really easy to get the colours you want if you're making a reference colour, and if you're going for a particular style it can give you a better idea of how those colours work and how they blend together. Additionally, Fighter Factory also allows you to export your palettes as a colour indexed image, which you can then use for the same process later, or just to keep as an image file in case you're just making palettes for fun. I personally recommend trying both of these tools as both of them are absolutely incredible and go a long way to making palette modding extremely accessible. I personally use both, however Fighter Factory is my personal favourite. It may take a while for you to get used to it, but the reference features and other tools that really get into the minutiae of editing colours in more refined and intricate ways, there's just really nothing like it. And since these mods work around the game files present on your device, other players don't have to be subjected to whatever mod you're making unless you share it with them. So no non-competitive colour vomit or nude mod jump scares to worry about. Well, usually, the same cannot be said for Street Fighter 6. Most of these mods are usually posted as indexed PNGs in dedicated Discord servers, and as you can tell, I've made quite a few contributions myself. Colour modding is a pastime I've gotten really into over the past couple of years, and if I can use my platform to glaze the fuck out of colour editing, girl, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'd love to go through some of my personal favourite colours made by others, but I feel that's something I'd rather do after getting proper permission from the people who made the colours. Plus I could have enough things to say about these colours to make an entire second video, and this video is already kinda dragging, so I may as well save my energy for that. When I was making this video, I provided some friends as well as KLUB R members with a fully colour indexed sprite for Kaius, my avatar and mascot, to see what costumes people could come up with for them. It's a colour separated sprite, so the colours that are available to be edited were made pretty clear, and I was not disappointed with how creative people could get. Was it an exercise to show people how fun palette editing can be? Almost definitely. I'll show these edits in place of the monthly fan art as the video closes out. So, was there really a point to this video? No, there literally wasn't. I just wanted an excuse to talk about Palmod and Fighter Factory. Thanks to all these fine folks you see here, and an extra special thanks to MickXCat, Penross and Phenomenal for supporting me on Patreon. The links to support me are in the description. And before I fully tune out, I want to give a special shout out to CycleAndy.com, which was a site that has all of the Capcom colours just all there to be viewed, and it was a really good resource for this video, and whoever made that site should get like Eternal Youth or something, I don't know. Bye!